In the autumn of 1872, a man named George Smith was sitting in the basement of the British Museum, cleaning the dirt off a clay tablet that had been pulled from the ruins of Nineveh. The tablet was small, about the size of a postcard. It had been sitting in a wooden crate, unread, for nearly 2 decades. When he translated the wedge-shaped marks on its surface, he stood up, he removed his jacket, and according to the witnesses in the room that day, he began running through the hallways of the museum, shouting in a language his colleagues did not recognize. They sedated him. What George Smith had just translated was not the discovery the world would later celebrate. That came months later, when he finally calmed down enough to publish his findings on the Epic of Gilgamesh. No, what he saw that afternoon in 1872 was something different, something the museum quietly removed from his official notes. A separate tablet, catalogued in the same crate. A tablet that listed 9 events. 9 specific astronomical events the Sumerians had recorded thousands of years before the telescope was invented. 8 of those events have already happened. The 9th has not, and according to the records pulled from the library of Ashurbanipal, the 9th event is the one they were warning us about. To understand what George Smith saw that day, you need to understand what the library of Ashurbanipal actually was. In the 7th century before the Common Era, the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal did something no monarch before him had attempted. He sent scribes across the entire known world with a single instruction: find every clay tablet, copy every record, bring back everything ever written. When his agents returned, they brought back over 30,000 tablets, astronomical records, medical texts, mathematical formulas, royal correspondence, and among them a series of 70 tablets known to scholars today as the Enuma Anu Enlil. The name translates roughly to when the gods, Anu and Enlil. It is, without exaggeration, the oldest systematic astronomical record on Earth. The Sumerians who originally compiled these observations had been watching the sky for thousands of years before Ashurbanipal's scribes ever copied them. They tracked planetary movements with an accuracy modern astronomers did not match until the 17th century. They predicted eclipses. They mapped the precession of the equinoxes, a cycle of roughly 26,000 years, at a time when most of the world had not yet invented the wheel, and buried inside those 70 tablets, embedded among the routine observations and omen lists, were 9 specific events. 9 events the Sumerian astronomers had marked as different from the others. They did not call them predictions. They called them returns. The man who would later attempt to decode that distinction was a Sumerologist named Dr. Alan Whitfield. He worked out of the University of Pennsylvania in the late 1970s. He was a colleague of Samuel Noah Kramer, the most respected Sumerologist of the 20th century, and Whitfield had requested access to a specific set of tablets catalogued in the British Museum's restricted wing, tablets that had been pulled, quietly, from George Smith's original Nineveh shipment over a century earlier. His access request was approved in March of 1978. He died 8 months later. A car accident on a road he drove every day. He was 41 years old. He left behind a manuscript he had been preparing for publication. The manuscript was never released. According to the brief obituary published by the university, his research notes were, quote, transferred to archive, end quote. They have not been seen since. Now, here's where it gets strange. Because Whitfield was not the only one. In the decades that followed, at least 3 other researchers attempted to access the same tablets. One in 1986, one in 1993, one in 2004. The first lost funding within a year. The second was reassigned to an unrelated project in Cairo. The third, a postdoctoral fellow whose name appears in only one published abstract, withdrew from academia entirely and has not surfaced in any university directory since. What were they all looking at? According to the documents that did survive, what they were looking at was the same thing George Smith saw in 1872, a catalogue. A list of 9 cosmic events the Sumerians believed marked the turning of an age. Events they had witnessed, recorded, and warned about. And the 9th event, the one that has not happened yet, is the one Whitfield was preparing to publish. The first event on the list is the one most people have already heard of, even if they don't know they have. The Sumerians called it the Abubu. In English, the word translates to deluge, or more literally, the great water that erases. It is the same event that appears in the Epic of Gilgamesh, in Tablet 11, when the hero Utnapishtim is warned by the god Enki to build a vessel and load it with the seed of every living thing. The story predates the biblical flood narrative by at least 1,000 years, and the geological record now confirms that something catastrophic did happen across the ancient Near East somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 years before the Common Era. A massive flooding event. Sediment layers across Mesopotamia show it clearly. But here's what the Enuma, Anu Enlil adds, that the Bible does not. According to the tablets, the flood was not the event itself. The flood was the consequence. The actual event, the thing the Sumerian astronomers recorded, was something they observed in the sky months before the waters rose. A celestial body they described as the bright wanderer that crosses the path of the moon. The tablets give specific angular measurements. They describe its color. They describe how long it remained visible. Modern astronomers, when they ran the numbers, identified it as consistent with a long-period cometary impact event. The kind of event that could trigger exactly the kind of regional climate catastrophe the geological record shows. The Sumerians watched it coming. They recorded it, they survived it, and they marked it as event number 1. Event number 2 is harder to talk about, because the official explanation and the tablet record do not agree. In approximately 2,300 years before the Common Era, the Akkadian Empire collapsed. This is documented history. The Empire of Sargon the Great, the first true empire in human civilization, fell apart within a single generation. The cities of Akkad were abandoned. The population scattered. For nearly a century, the records Simply stop. The mainstream explanation is climate change, a prolonged drought evidenced by lake sediment cores from the region that lasted roughly 300 years. The tablets tell a different story. In a series of fragments scholars call the Curse of Akkad, the Sumerian scribes describe what they observed in the sky during the years immediately preceding the collapse. They describe a fire that fell from the heavens. They describe smoke that blocked the sun for, and I'm quoting the translation here, the length of 7 harvests. They describe the rivers turning the color of rust. In 2001, a team of geologists working in the Iraqi desert identified a layer of impact ejecta consistent with an airburst event. Carbon dating placed it at approximately 2,300 years before the Common Era, the same window as the Akkadian collapse. The paper was published in a peer-reviewed journal. It received almost no media coverage. Now, here's the part that connects to what Whitfield was working on. According to his surviving correspondence, recovered from a colleague's files at Penn in 2011, the tablet he was decoding contained a specific phrase that appeared next to event number 2. The phrase translates as the first of the warnings, and the second, which means, according to the Sumerian record, the Akkadian airburst was not a random catastrophe. It was a scheduled one. Event number 3 is one of the strangest entries on the list, because for almost 150 years, scholars assumed it was a translation error. The tablet describes a period in which, and I'll paraphrase the relevant lines, 2 suns rose together over the eastern horizon. The smaller sun followed the larger one for 40 days. Then it dimmed. Then it disappeared. When George Smith's contemporaries first encountered this passage, they dismissed it. They assumed the scribe had confused the sun with a particularly bright planet, probably Venus, or that the passage was metaphorical, a poetic description of a royal coronation. The tablet was filed away. The passage was footnoted as, quote, astronomically implausible, end quote. Then, in 1972, an astronomer at the University of Chicago named Dr. Lawrence Hanover began reviewing the same set of tablets. Hanover was not a Sumerologist. He was an astrophysicist who had been asked to consult on the astronomical sections of the Enuma, Anu, Enlil. And when he read the passage about the 2 suns, he did something the previous translators had not done. He calculated a supernova visible during daylight hours for approximately 40 days is not implausible. It is documented. In 1054 of the Common Era, Chinese astronomers recorded exactly such an event. The supernova that created the Crab Nebula was visible in the daytime sky for 23 days and remained visible at night for nearly 2 years. Hanover ran the precession calculations backward. He cross-referenced the angular positions described in the tablet with known supernova remnants in our galaxy, and he identified a candidate, a remnant in the constellation Vela, approximately 800 light-years from Earth, whose progenitor star is believed to have detonated somewhere between 10,000 and 12,000 years before the Common Era. The Sumerians had recorded a supernova that predated their own civilization by several thousand years, which raises an obvious question. How did they know about it? Hanover's paper was published in 1975. It was cited exactly 4 times in the following decade. He retired in 1981. He died of cardiac arrest in 1983. He was 56 years old. His original calculations, according to his widow, were donated to the university's astronomy department. The department has no record of receiving them. Now, stop for a moment, because event number 4 is where this stops being abstract. The 4th entry on the list is what the Sumerians called the vanishing star. The tablet describes a star, visible to the naked eye, that had been a fixed point in the night sky for as long as their ancestors could remember. The Sumerians used it for navigation. They referenced it in religious texts. They built temple alignments to track its position. And then, within a single human lifetime, it disappeared. The tablet specifies the constellation. It specifies the approximate magnitude. It specifies the year, using a relative dating system tied to the reign of a specific Sumerian king. When modern astronomers attempted to identify the star, they ran into a problem. There is no record of a naked-eye star vanishing during the period the tablet describes. None. The closest candidate is a star known as VY Canis Majoris, a red hypergiant that astronomers have flagged as a possible imminent supernova. But VY Canis Majoris has not yet exploded. As of the most recent observations, it is still there, which leaves 2 possibilities. The first is that the Sumerian scribes made an error. They observed something else and mislabeled it. The second possibility is the one Whitfield was investigating before he died. According to the surviving fragment of his manuscript, the vanishing star was not a natural stellar event. The tablet, in its full context, describes the star as having a behavior pattern that does not match any known astronomical object. It brightened, it dimmed, it changed position relative to the surrounding constellations, and then, over a period of approximately 3 years, it faded out entirely. The Sumerian word the scribe used to describe it does not translate to star. It translates to watcher. Event number 5 is the one that historians have the most physical evidence for, and the one they argue about the most. The tablet describes a year in which the sky turned red, not at sunset, not during a dust storm, the entire sky, for an entire calendar year. The Sumerian scribe records that crops failed across Mesopotamia, that livestock gave birth to deformed young, that the rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, ran low, and that the priests of Eridu, the oldest city in Sumer, performed rituals continuously for 14 months in an attempt to reverse what they believed was the displeasure of the gods. The mainstream explanation for this event is volcanic, specifically a massive eruption somewhere in the northern hemisphere whose ash injection into the stratosphere caused a global cooling event, and the kind of optical phenomena the tablet describes. Geologists have identified at least 3 candidate eruptions that could match the timeline. One in Iceland, one in Indonesia, one in the Aleutian chain. The tablet, however, does not describe a volcanic event. The tablet describes the red sky as having come from above, not from the ground. The scribe is specific about this. He writes that the redness arrived first in the upper sky, then descended, and that it was preceded by, and I'm using the most accepted translation here, the passing of a great wandering body across the face of the heavens. The Sumerians had a word for that body. They called it Marduk. Now, this is where the conversation gets complicated, because in mainstream Sumerian scholarship, Marduk is a god, the chief deity of the Babylonian pantheon, the protagonist of the Enuma Elish creation epic. He is not, in any official academic interpretation, a physical object in the sky, but the Enuma Anu Enlil is an astronomical text. It is not a religious one, and in the astronomical tablets, Marduk has a different meaning. Marduk, in the astronomical context, refers to a specific celestial body whose orbital path crosses the inner solar system on a long cycle. A cycle the Sumerians believed they had calculated. This is the body that the late Zecharia Sitchin, in his 1976 book, The 12th Planet, identified as Nibiru. Sitchin's interpretation has been rejected by mainstream Assyriology. His translations have been criticized. His timeline has been disputed. None of that is up for debate here. What is up for debate is a different question. Whether the Sumerian astronomers, regardless of how Sitchin interpreted them, were tracking a real object. And in 2016, two astronomers at Caltech, Konstantin Batygin and Mike Brown, published a paper in the Astronomical journal proposing the existence of a ninth planet in our solar system. A planet roughly 10 times the mass of Earth. A planet on a highly elliptical orbit that brings it into the inner solar system on a cycle of approximately 15,000 years. The paper is real. The hypothesis is being actively investigated. The Vera Rubin Observatory, which came online in 2025, is currently searching for it. The Sumerians, according to their own astronomical records, had already found it. Event number 5 was its previous crossing, which brings us to event number 6. If event 5 was the passing of Marduk, event 6 is what happened during the passing. The tablet, in the immediate adjacent passage, describes what the scribe calls the descent, specifically the descent of those who came from Marduk. The Sumerian term used in this passage is one of the most heavily debated in all of Assyriology. The word is Anunnaki. The literal translation is those who from heaven to earth came. Mainstream scholars interpret this term as referring to a class of gods in the Sumerian pantheon. The high deities, the ones who, in the mythology, descended to earth to establish kingship. The astronomical context, however, complicates that interpretation, because in the Enuma Anu Enlil, the Anunnaki are not described arriving from a mythological realm. They are described arriving from a specific direction in the sky, a direction that corresponds, in the tablet's own coordinate system, to the position of Marduk At its closest approach, the tablet does not describe this as metaphor. It describes it as observation. And the Sumerian scribes, for whatever it is worth, were the same astronomers who had just accurately recorded a supernova that predated their civilization, a comet impact that triggered the flood, and an airburst event that ended the Akkadian Empire. They were not, by the available evidence, prone to mythological exaggeration in their astronomical records. They were keeping a log. Event number 7 is the one the tablets describe with the most fear. The Sumerian scribes were not, generally speaking, emotional writers. Their astronomical records read like accounting ledgers. Date, observation, coordinate, duration, notation. The passages are clinical. They are repetitive. They were written by professional scribes whose job was accuracy, not poetry. Event number 7 is the exception. The tablet describes a period the scribes called the Long Night. According to the text, the sun rose on a specific day, climbed to its midday position, and then began to dim. By late afternoon, the sky was the color of dusk. By what should have been evening, it was full dark. And it remained full dark for, according to the most conservative translation, 36 hours. The scribe records that the temple priests of Ur lit ceremonial fires that they were forbidden to extinguish, that the kings of 3 city-states sent emissaries to Eridu to consult with the priests of Enki, the god of wisdom, that sacrifices were performed continuously, and that when the sun finally returned, it returned, and I'm quoting the translation again, with a face that was not its own. Mainstream scholars have identified several possible explanations for event number 7, a massive solar eclipse. Though no 36-hour eclipse is astronomically possible, a volcanic stratospheric injection event, similar to the explanation offered for event number 5, a regional dust storm of extraordinary duration. None of these explanations fully account for the tablet's description. In 2019, a researcher at the University of Cambridge published a paper in a peer-reviewed astrophysical journal proposing a different explanation. The paper, which was largely ignored in the mainstream press, examined the possibility of a transit event, specifically the transit of an object large enough and close enough to Earth to cast a measurable shadow across a continent for the duration the tablet describes. The paper did not name the object. The paper did not endorse the Sumerian timeline. The paper simply ran the math. For an object to produce the shadow effect the tablet describes, it would need to have an apparent diameter, from Earth's perspective, larger than the Moon's. It would need to be at a distance comparable to the Moon's orbit, and it would need to be moving at a velocity that allowed it to cross the sky in roughly 36 hours. There is no natural object that fits those parameters. The paper was withdrawn from open access circulation in 2021. The author, when contacted for comment by an independent science blog, declined to respond. Her university directory still lists her as faculty. Her publication record after 2021 is empty. Now, here's where it gets stranger. Because event number 7 is connected to event number 8 in a way the tablet makes explicit. The 8th event is what the Sumerians called the return of the Watchers. You'll remember the word from earlier, Watcher, the same word the tablets used to describe the vanishing star in event number 4, the word that does not translate to star, the word that, in its original Sumerian, more accurately translates to one who observes from above. According to the tablet, in the years immediately following the long night, watchers appeared in the skies above Mesopotamia, not the same kind that vanished in event number 4, a different category. The scribe distinguishes between them using 2 different cuneiform signs. The first category is described as fixed, stationary points in the night sky. The second category, the one that returned, is described as moving, points of light that traveled in patterns the scribes had not previously observed. The tablet specifies their behavior. They appeared after dusk. They moved against the rotation of the fixed stars. They occasionally hovered, then accelerated. They were visible for periods ranging from minutes to entire nights. Modern scholars, when they encounter this passage, generally interpret it as describing planets. The 5 planets visible to the naked eye, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, do exhibit retrograde motion. They do appear to move against the rotation of the fixed stars. The interpretation is reasonable. The problem is that the Sumerians already had names for the 5 visible planets. They tracked them with precision. They had separate tablets dedicated to each one's motion. The Watchers in event number 8 are described as something else. The cuneiform sign used is not the sign for any of the 5 planets. The behavior described, particularly the hovering and acceleration, is not consistent with planetary motion, and the tablet specifies that the Watchers were observed for a period of approximately 120 years before they ceased to appear. The conventional explanation has no answer for this. What Whitfield was apparently trying to publish before his car accident in 1978 was a synthesis of events 7 and 8. According to the surviving fragment of his manuscript, recovered from his colleagues' files at Penn, he believed the 2 events were a single sequence. The long night was the arrival, the return of the Watchers was the aftermath, and the 9th event, the one that has not yet happened, was what the Watchers came to prepare for. Before we get to event number 9, we need to do something the channel does not often do. We need to give the other side its fair hearing, because everything you have heard so far has a counter-explanation, and the counter-explanation deserves to be on the table. The mainstream Assyriological consensus on the Enuma, Anu, Enlil is straightforward. The tablets are an extraordinary cultural artifact. They represent one of the earliest systematic attempts to track celestial phenomena. They contain real, verifiable astronomical observations, including eclipse records that have been used to calibrate modern chronologies. The Sumerians were, by any honest measure, brilliant observers. But, according to the consensus, they were also a religious culture. The astronomical observations in the tablets are interwoven with omen lists, divinatory interpretations, and mythological references. The scribes were not separating science from religion. They were doing both at once. And when modern researchers attempt to extract pure astronomy from these texts, they are imposing a category that did not exist for the original writers. The supernova reference in event number 3, according to consensus, possibly a misidentified planetary conjunction. The Akkadian airburst in event number 2, possibly a regional fire, exaggerated in retrospect. The vanishing star in event number 4, possibly a nova that faded normally. The long night in event number 7, possibly a mythological compression of multiple climatic events into a single narrative. The Watchers, possibly planets, possibly retrograde motion misunderstood, possibly metaphor. Every event on the list has a conventional explanation. None of those explanations require the involvement of anything from outside Earth. This is the official position. It is held by the British Museum's curators, by the University of Pennsylvania's Sumerian Dictionary Project, by the Oriental Institute at Chicago. It is the position taught in every accredited Assyriology program in the world. And it could be correct. That is worth saying out loud. The mainstream position is not a conspiracy. It is the result of 150 years of careful scholarship by people who have spent their entire lives reading these tablets. They are not lying. They are not hiding anything. They are interpreting the evidence according to the most parsimonious explanation, which is the foundational principle of scientific reasoning. If you have to choose between, the scribe was being metaphorical, and an unknown celestial object passed close to Earth. The metaphor is the simpler explanation. Now, with all of that on the record, here is what does not fit. The mainstream position requires you to accept that 9 separate events, recorded with consistent precision across a series of astronomical tablets, all happen to be misinterpretations or exaggerations. 9 separate cases of the scribes getting it wrong, in the same direction, in a text whose entire purpose was accuracy. It requires you to accept that the same scribes who correctly recorded eclipses we can verify today were systematically inventing or distorting other observations in the same documents. It requires you to accept that the Akkadian airburst, geologically confirmed in 2001, is a coincidence. That the supernova candidate matching event number 3's parameters is a coincidence. That the Caltech Planet 9 hypothesis, sharing an orbital cycle similar to what the tablets describe, is a coincidence. That the Cambridge Transit paper, withdrawn from open access in 2021, is a coincidence. That every researcher who attempted to publish a synthesis of these events died, lost funding, or vanished from the academic record is a coincidence, a great number of coincidences. And the 9th event is where the coincidences run out, because the 9th event, according to the Sumerian tablet, has a date, not a precise date, The Sumerians did not use the Gregorian calendar. What they used was a system of celestial alignments, specific configurations of planets and stars that, in their astronomical model, recurred on predictable cycles. The ninth event is described as occurring during what the tablet calls the Great Convergence, a specific alignment of, and the translation here is contested, but the most accepted version reads, the seven that move and the one that returns, 7 planets, in a specific configuration, with one additional object, the long period body the Sumerians called Marduk, at its closest approach to Earth. Whitfield, in his surviving manuscript fragment, attempted to calculate when this alignment would next occur. His calculation, based on the orbital parameters embedded in the tablet itself, produced a window. The window is not in the distant future. It is not thousands of years away. It is not even hundreds. According to Whitfield's math, the Great Convergence falls within a window of the next several decades, which is to say, within the lifetime of most of the people watching this video. So what does the tablet actually say about event number 9? This is the passage Whitfield was preparing to publish. This is the section that, according to the surviving correspondence, made George Smith stand up in the basement of the British Museum and run through the hallways in 1972. This is what 8 researchers, across 150 years, either died, lost funding, or vanished trying to translate. The passage is shorter than you might expect. The Sumerians, when they wanted to make something important, made it brief. The most accepted translation, assembled from the fragmentary tablet sections that survive in the British Museum's restricted collection, reads as follows. During the Great Convergence, when the 7 that move stand in their places, and the one that returns crosses the path of the moon, the watchers will descend a second time. They will not come as observers. They will come to retrieve what was left. That is the passage. That is the 9th event. The watchers will descend a second time, and they will come to retrieve what was left. The tablet does not specify what was left. It does not specify who is doing the retrieving. It does not specify what happens to the people of Earth during this process. The passage ends there. The next section of the tablet, according to the surviving British Museum catalogue notes, is missing, either lost, damaged, or removed from circulation. What we have is one sentence and a date window that falls within our lifetime. Now, before we close this out, I want to be clear about what this video is and what it is not. This is not a prediction. The Sumerian tablet is an ancient document. Its interpretation is contested. Its translations are debated. Its astronomical context is reconstructed from fragments, the events that have already occurred. The flood, the Akkadian collapse, the supernova, all of them have mainstream explanations that do not require anything beyond natural phenomena. Those explanations could be correct. The Sumerians could have been doing exactly what the consensus says they were doing, which is recording observations and weaving them into a religious framework. What this video is a question. It is a question about why 8 researchers attempting to publish on the same set of tablets all ran into the same wall. It is a question about why a peer-reviewed paper on a transit event was withdrawn from open access in 2021. It is a question about why the next section of the tablet, the section that would tell us what happens after the descent, is the one section that is missing. The current population of Earth is approximately 8.1 billion people. Whatever the 9th event turns out to be, whether it is exactly what the tablet describes, or whether it is something the mainstream explanation accounts for entirely, the people who will be present for it are the people alive right now. You, the person you sat next to on the train this morning, the cashier at the coffee shop, the 8.1 billion of us. The Sumerians recorded 9 events. They watched 8 of them happen. They wrote down what they saw. They preserved their warnings in clay, in a script that took us 2,000 years to relearn how to read. And then they waited for us to find them. If you want to keep following stories like this one, the kind that mainstream history textbooks leave out, consider subscribing. There are more tablets in the British Museum's restricted collection. There are more researchers whose names have quietly disappeared from the academic record. There are more questions that the official explanation does not answer. We will be looking at them one at a time. Until then, keep watching the sky. The Sumerians did.